Still a couple more joining, but we'll make a bit of a start. And basically, you're all muted. Thank you for joining. You're all muted. But if you have a question at any point, you can unmute yourself. I would talk you through how to do that on Zoom, but I can't remember off the top of my head. But hopefully, it's fairly intuitive. And there will be time for questions as we go as well. So then I'll just kind of unmute everybody, and people can just jump in and ask any questions. What I would say is if there's anything really pressing, then feel free to jump in with a question. But hopefully I'll cover your question by the end anyway. But if not, then yeah, we can. Or if anything's there really jumping out at you, feel free. So this is all about ensuring that your club is up to the right standard in terms of safety, hygiene and cleanliness for when you're able to reopen. And it's also about staying that way, because we could all knock down and build new leisure centres or health clubs again from scratch, but we've still got to keep them in that condition over time. And just as this it relates to new, it also relates to doing any deep cleaning as well. So what you're going to get out of this, firstly, you're going to get some evidence as to why cleanliness has always been important in 5 key areas of your business and how this is now magnified due to everything that's been going on. You're going to get 3 big insights about this topic. You're going to learn about some of the historic problems that have caused leisure clubs to struggle in this field in the past. I'm going to give you a roadmap for how you can get your club up to scratch, particularly if you're wanting to try and do that in-house, so it's safe and hygienic. So what to do, how to know it's working, how long it's going to take, and when to start. And then I'm going to give you a framework for kind of how to maintain those standards as well. So an idea of what are the sorts of things you need to think about once you are open to stay on top of things. And then I'm going to give you a bit of information on how we might be able to help you. Just going to add a couple more people in on the waiting room. And then there'll be a part 2, which is totally optional, which is, if you've heard all of that and you'd like to learn a bit more about what we do and how we might be able to help you, then you can stay on the line and I'll give you a bit more information on that. Obviously, if that's not of interest, then no problem at all. And I'll clearly signpost when that part's coming. So if you don't know me or my company, this image kind of brings home what we do, hopefully. So it's all about taking facilities and particularly floors where you've got a risk of safety from a slip perspective, a bad appearance, and kind of bacteria and hygiene levels being poor, up to being clean, safe and hygienic. That brings a range of benefits. And of late, we've been getting increasingly involved in the whole world, as we all have, of the virus and what we can do to actually disinfect, decontaminate and try to minimize the risk of anybody contracting the virus in any of our buildings. A couple more latecomers. There's somebody called Graham Bentley who's been trying to sign in. It just doesn't seem to work. So I'll try and let him in again, and hopefully he might get in there this time. So fundamentally, my belief is that cleanliness is going to be the key thing now that members are going to be interested in, paranoid about, and caring about. And that's backed up with some data, which we'll get onto in a moment. But cleanliness has always been important, and it's always been important in 5 areas of your business. So it's always been important for new membership sales. So there's evidence that cleanliness is even more important than price when it comes to people deciding which health club, leisure club to join. Cleanliness has always been important when it comes to your overall revenue and top line. So IRSA, the industry body in the States, did some great research which showed that a club that invested in the top quartile of cleanliness, so in other words, those investing the most, had average revenue per member of 2.35 times a club in the bottom 25% of investment in cleanliness. Cleanliness has always been important for safety as well. So the biggest cause of accidents and injuries and insurance claims in the sector consistently year on year is slips. And my experience over the last decade or so is that the majority of floor surfaces nowadays are pretty good. Where slips happen is where these floor surfaces aren't cleaned and maintained that well. And the average cost of a claim is about £10,000, so it can be quite costly. Fourthly, cleanliness has always been important for retention. So again, some IRSA data, which suggests if you look at a historic average and look at a typical club in the UK with 2,000 members at £500 a year, you know, that cleanliness is costing a club £45,000 a year through attrition. And finally, cleanliness has always been important for profitability. So a really great bit of work was done recently analysing the Sport England National Benchmarking Service survey with LeisureNet Solutions, and that showed that there's a direct correlation between cleanliness, Net Promoter Score, and profitability. And this again is in the old world. So it's always been important, but I'd say now it's no longer important, it's vital. And if you look up the definition of vital, one of the definitions is indispensable to the continuance of life. And that sentiment has been echoed by many people in the industry. There's a guy who's quite prominent in the States called Blaine McHaney, and he has said people are now cleaning as if their business's life depended on it, because it does. And he also said, be prepared to never ever let up on your cleaning and sanitising practices moving forward. So it's the new normal in the context of leisure clubs. A bit of evidence about what's been going on in members' mind. So this clip comes from Facebook, and there's a group called The Collective, which some of you may be members of. And it was just a quick round table the other day with David Monkhouse from LeisureNet, and he gave a bit of an update in terms of some data that they've been collecting on behalf of operators around the country. They've got over 35,000 responses now, and looking at what members are actually saying is going to be important to them. So just a quick clip to have a listen of.
So, David, you've been having lots of conversations on Monkhouse Mondays, but also you've got lots of data as well from your LeisureNet research, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's really interesting actually to link it to Dave and what UK Activists said, because I think listening to customers is really important. We've done, the survey's still live, we've still got quite a few operators to issue, but we've had 25,000 responses. And I had a quick look at one of the Northwest trusts that take up over 3,000 responses. And it was really interesting because 21% of people said they were going to use a building more when it reopened. But really interesting, of those, that 21%, so 446 people said that social distancing was going to be really important when the site reopened. But 87% said that cleanliness was going to be really important. So I think if we combine what we're hearing from our customers with the guidance we're getting from the UK Act, with the undercurrent, obviously, of what the government is allowing us to do, we can do some really interesting things about communicating now what types of things we're going to be doing when we do reopen, because there is demand. People do want to get out there.
So, Dave, you've been having lots of conversations.
Didn't want to play that again. So yeah, 87% of the members said cleanliness was going to be very important to them when they're coming back. Another latecomer coming through. So in that context, three big insights, learnings, topics for you to consider. Firstly, I mean, I've known this for years, but it's staggering to hear that people don't necessarily know this. You can only disinfect or indeed sanitize a truly clean surface. So you need to bear that in mind when it comes to, you know, if our objective is to be hygienic, we have to be clean. You can't be hygienic without first being clean. And we did a big white paper on that recently. Secondly, true cleanliness can be measured. And I call this 3D cleanliness. So we use these 3 metrics to measure the effectiveness of any kind of cleaning regime. So there's standards, which is the first thing, and that is qualitative, but you can measure it and monitor it over time. So it's, what do surfaces look like? What do they feel like? So for an example of that would be, if you're walking through a restaurant and the floor is sticky, that suggests there's grease on the floor or something else on the floor and it's not clean, or a tabletop in a cafe. And smell, and obviously smell is quite visceral. So go to a hospital, you're going to get that sort of bleachy sort of smell, which I know they really work hard to achieve, and that gives you the sense, the feeling that the building is clean. There's hygiene, clearly, and you can measure that quantifiably. You can measure bacteria levels. I'll give you some tips on how that can be done. And then when it comes to floors, you can also measure the slip resistance of floors. Now, a floor or a surface of any kind, in fact, could look clean. It might feel clean, it might smell clean, but it could still have bacteria on it. A floor could look clean, etc., but it might still be slippery. So you want to try and get all these 3 things together if you can, to sort of really know that you're achieving true cleanliness. And thirdly, to do effective cleaning, you've got to get your ROTAS right. So I spent quite a long time putting this acronym together. Not ROTAS as in your plans for cleaning, but ROTAS as in regularity. So how often are you cleaning a surface? Organisation, who's overseeing this? Do they know what good looks like? Are they managing it well on a daily basis? Time. So to clean something requires a certain amount of time. It's a science, not an art. Are we investing enough time into this? Ability. So do we have the right people that are trained and experienced and motivated, which is a key thing, that are delivering this work? And are we using the right system? Are we using the right process, in other words? So are we equipping the people with the right stuff to be able to do the job? And all of those things, as you'll see from the diagram, they're kind of like cogs, and they all interrelate and they all work together. And if you fall down on any one of those points, it's going to start breaking the system. So you need to be trying to get all of these things working in harmony. All this stuff, by the way, is readily available on our website. So don't feel you need to be scribbling furiously notes or anything like that. And I'm happy to share the slides as well. So so there's no problem. Just sort of take it in. So in that context, why has this been a problem in the past for the leisure sector? I think there's a few issues. So one of the problems is that people don't really know what true cleanliness is. So people haven't been measuring hygiene. They haven't necessarily known what good looks like. Managers often have blinkers on, in my experience, and they say, "Oh, my club's okay," but actually it probably isn't. Secondly, there's an analogy that I like to use, and yes, that is me on my wedding day in Positano in Italy, a bit like a wedding suit. So, that was a few years ago now. If I tried to put my wedding suit on now, it probably wouldn't fit me, being honest. But I wouldn't say I've noticeably got fatter in the last 5 or 6 years, but your weight kind of can creep up on you slowly, just as dirt can kind of creep up on you slowly. And also there's a huge amount of churn. So particularly in local authority world, where some of these centres are quite old, it's very possible that there isn't a single member of staff that was there when that centre was built, and therefore they probably don't know what exactly good looks like. So that's one of the issues. Historically, cleaning has been badly managed and badly delivered, in my experience. And you'll see that these kind of these points tally up with the ROTAS acronym. So, we haven't been cleaning surfaces often enough. Managers don't really know what the right standard is, what they should be expecting their staff to achieve. We've not been allocating enough time to do the tasks properly. We've not been upskilling. We've not been training. We've not been motivating the staff as much as we would, ideally have done, and we haven't been providing them, for various reasons, with the right stuff to do the job. So, you know, if I think about every single leisure facility I've been to over the last 10 odd years, and there's a hell of a lot of them there. I'm not saying that every single one had all of these problems, but they all had at least one of them, and many of them had lots of them. So these are just some of the things that we've done, you know, not as well as we may have liked in the past. And that's led to kind of pretty poor standards almost universally across the board, and that's irrespective of what part of the sector you're in, and that's irrespective of how you do your cleaning, because I'm not here to start knocking contract cleaners, because, you know, going back to the model, if you outsource your cleaning to a contractor, but you only give them 10 hours to do a 20-hour job, of course they're not going to do that well. And it's irrespective of, you know, I've seen all sorts of products, of magic products here and magic equipment there, and even when I'm seeing those facilities using those things, that's only one element, and if they're not getting everything else right, you still end up with not the standards that you want. So, you know, all these floors are being cleaned, but they're not being cleaned properly, properly and effectively. And remember, again, these are real life floors in real life leisure centres. It's impossible to disinfect a surface like a floor without first cleaning it. So we need to get these surfaces up. Another problem, which is kind of been exacerbated and was probably going to be the hot topic in the sector in April this year, had it not been for the coronavirus, is obviously the increases in the minimum wage. So trying to throw labour at this problem is, you know, increasingly costly, and again, it's only one element, and that may not necessarily be effective. But looking at most leisure clubs I've been to over the years, you know, to get them up to a 9 or a 10 sort of out of 10 standard on a daily basis, they probably need, you know, 2, maybe more staff adding on to what they've got to give them the resource to actually be able to clean surfaces frequently enough using the right kit with enough amount of time. So, you know, that's a big investment. And there's been a big gap between expectation and reality in the past. So this again is from the Sport England data. If you look at the ranking of importance for customers, cleanliness of activity spaces is number 1, cleanliness of changing rooms is number 2, and then if you look at their satisfaction, it's totally the inverse. Cleanliness of changing rooms is the area that people are least happy with, and activity spaces. So, you know, we haven't been meeting the customers' members' goals in the past. So that's where we are. How am I doing as a motivational speaker? Thumbs up, thumbs down. Everybody looks. nobody's cutting their throats or anything like that, so that's good. But the good news is that there is light at the end of the tunnel. So let's not be too downbeat. But that's a kind of honest opinion from me as to where the sector is and why. It is possible to improve standards. It is possible to keep clubs hygienic and safe, and there's a few examples there of stuff we've done in the past, but we won't dwell on those. So how can you do that? So here's a bit of a roadmap in terms of what you need to be thinking about to try to relaunch the club from a cleanliness perspective, because what you need is that when your members come back through the door on July the 4th or whatever the date is, bit skeptical about July the 4th, but let's see. You know, you want them to walk in and think, wow, this place really cares about me. They really care about my safety, and they've clearly invested a lot in getting this right. What you don't want is somebody walking back through the door and thinking, wow, what have these guys been doing for the last 3 months? Why don't they care about me? Why haven't they tried to make this safe? So through this section, we'll touch on how do you actually do it? How do you know if it's working? How long do you need to do it? And when should you start? So the process, in very simple terms, is, you know, as I said, a thorough deep clean to remove all contamination. You need to be doing some disinfection, I would suggest. Now, of course, there's not going to be any coronavirus in any of your facilities, but I think, you know, best practice would be both so you can stand there with your hand on your heart to say you've done it, but also so that you can communicate it to the members that you disinfect as well. And then you need a maintenance and a monitoring program. And that ROTAS model, that's going to be your key methodology. So that's what you need to get right to do the deep clean, and that's what you need to get right for your maintenance. In terms of basic kit, now it's impossible to go into every single piece of kit you might need, but this is going to be the bare minimum. You know, you might need certain bits of specialist kit for different rooms or different surfaces or whatever it might be. But at a very basic level, this is what you need. You're going to need some cloths. I would suggest microfiber, and they should be color coded because you don't want to be doing cross contamination. You're going to need some mops and buckets. You're going to need some spray bottles. You're going to need some appropriate chemicals. You're going to need a cleaning machine like a buffer, or machines in plural, and you're going to need some sort of wet vacuum or extraction, because if we're trying to clean floors and other areas, you know, and carpets, for example, we need to be drying them off as well. So at a very basic level, that's the kit you're going to need. Can take some questions about that later. Other things you need to consider: PPE. So I wouldn't have your staff decked out like this, but you know, just thinking about PPE and what's appropriate and what people are going to feel comfortable wearing, because I think, you know, it's not just members that are going to be nervous about this, your staff are going to be nervous as well. Thinking about protecting and not damaging surfaces. So, you know, you can buy very strong acidic cleaning chemicals that you can use on floors, for example, but on certain floors, if you put those down, they're going to etch the floor or damage the floor, and then you've caused maybe more of a problem than you had before. And then things like contact time. So really critical point about trying to clean and disinfect is that all of these products that you can buy from whoever your supplier is will say we kill 99.99% of X, Y, and Z. But if you read the small print, what it says is that's based on a contact time of 2 minutes or 4 minutes or 6 minutes or whatever it might be. What we see a lot of if you think about going to a cafe on the high street or a coffee shop, you see a lot of, you know, spray a table, wipe it off, and that's clean and that's supposed to be clean and hygienic. Well, actually, that's not really doing anything from the perspective of killing any germs. You know, it's going to be removing a bit of surface contamination, but it needs, all these chemicals need contact time to actually kill any germs. Going back to our 3D cleanliness model, therefore, you need to start thinking about, you know, how do we know if this is working or not? So again, you're thinking about what's qualitative in terms of standards. You're thinking about what you can do to measure the level of hygiene, and potentially what you can do around slip resistance as well. In terms of hygiene, there's a couple of common methods. There's swabbing, where, so Public Health England, for example, if they were called out somewhere, they would do some swabs, they'd send those off to a lab, and in 72 hours you'd get an answer. Clearly that's not really any use to you guys when you're trying to clean your facilities. But there's a method called ATP, which measures the level of what's the word I'm looking for? Bacteria, I suppose, in simple terms, on the surface. And there's another product which is quite new to the market, which I think is fantastic, and I've been talking with SimSpa and UK Active about, which is called Fresh Check, which is basically a spray. It's a little bottle, you spray it onto a surface, and then if it changes colour, that tells you that the surface has got some bacteria on it. So if you were to, for example, spray it on your chopping board at home, and then you were to use your Dettol spray by first cleaning the surface and then disinfecting it and spray it again, it wouldn't change colour. So that's clean. So that could be both useful from the perspective of figuring out if your cleaning regime is working to get you up to scratch, but also potentially going forward to be able to show members and demonstrate, you know, practically in the real world, in live action, you know, that's clean. Because, for example, you could say, well, you know, I'll spray this floor that wasn't cleaned since last night and is bound to be dirty because people have been walking on it, and there you can see it's changed colour. Whereas if I spray this piece of equipment, which I've literally just cleaned before you've used it, it doesn't change colour, and then that's a way of evidencing what you're doing. But again, you need to make sure you're ticking these boxes before you then seek to do the disinfection piece. So what you need to do is figure out where you are, try and get some sort of benchmark, and then try something. So we'll talk in a minute about how we can help you to come up with a methodology, but however you want to try something, try a process. Does it pass those tests, or at least some of those tests? If it doesn't, try something else and iterate until you find something that does work. Once you've got something that works, then crack on and get the cleaning done. Don't just rush in. What I've seen in the past with leisure clubs is, okay, we're going to do our monthly deep clean, and all that really means is we buy a box of pizzas, we get 20 people to stay for 2 or 3 hours, and we try and just give the poolside a scrub, but nobody's ever actually questioning is what they're doing working. They're just going through the motions of doing something. Is it actually effective? Probably not. Therefore, it's probably a bit of a waste of time. So try and make sure what you're doing is actually working and is effective. So how long do you need? This is a question we get a lot, and the answer is probably a lot longer than you think. So remember some of those photos about what the general standards are like now, and this isn't this isn't cleaning as you know it. This is trying to solve the past problems that the industry has had, and solve potentially some underinvestment in the past to get you up to standard now. So you've got to think of this as a really laborious process that you've got to follow very carefully to get the outcome that you want. And again, it's a 2-stage process. So you've got to clean, and then you've got to disinfect. So to give you an idea, and this clearly is taking a very average type view, if you've got like a gym in the city, with no wet side and fairly small, probably something like 6 people for 2 days. If you've got something like London Aquatic Centre, which is massive, and you've got 2 50-metre pools and blah 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 blah, you probably, those same 6 people are probably going to need a full couple of weeks to do this properly. An average sort of local authority size wet facility, I would say, again, it's something like 6 people for 5 or 6 days is what you're going to need to do this properly, and that's going through it, methodically, checking it's working, cleaning everything up to scratch, and then disinfecting. I wouldn't put more than 6 people on it myself, because they're just going to get in each other's way. That's a decent size team that they can work closely with each other. They can learn as they go. They can be methodical. If you try and blitz it and do it more quickly with a lot more people, all that's going to happen is it's just going to go wrong. We've got one of the resources on our website is a calculator. So if you go to the website and there's a list, basically, you go through and put in the sizes of the different areas of your club. So, changed rooms is 200 square meters. The sports hall is 400 square meters. The reception is 150 square meters. Do all of that. It'll send that all through to us, and we'll come back to you with a more tailored idea of how many man hours or man days you should be putting into each different area. And given that, I think you probably should be starting this fairly soon. So again, the government has sort of said 4th of July is what we're maybe aiming towards. But if you're going to try and do this, you've got to have time to kind of iterate that process. You've got to have time to do that learning and check that actually what you're doing has worked, and therefore you need to allow enough time that if it doesn't work, you've got a plan B. If you're outsourcing it to somebody that's kind of specialist, like us, for example, there's only going to be a certain amount of capacity. If you're outsourcing it to a daily cleaning company, then they've got oodles of people, but they're probably going to have the same issues that you would doing it in-house, which is actually, do they really know what they're doing, and are they going to follow the right process? That's not to say they can't do it, but you know, they've got the same problems that you guys might have trying to do it yourself. So the sooner the better, really. And you can't afford to leave it too late. So what have we touched on then in part one? We've kind of gone through the fact that, you know, this has always been important, but it's really vital now, the life force of your business. The leisure sector is in a difficult position versus some other sectors because the historic standards have been particularly poor, particularly in the barefoot and wet areas like the changing rooms and the showers and the pool sides. So, you know, Starbucks trying to get up to scratch is much less intensive than a leisure centre trying to get up to scratch because there's less contamination. And you've got to disinfect, which you can't do on a dirty surface. So you do need the deep clean. Use that ROTAS model, and that's what you need to do as your roadmap. So, you know, get each of those things right, check they're working, work them through in harmony, and that's the way to do it. Use that 3D cleanliness model to assess whether or not it's working. And then obviously once you've opened up, you are going to need a maintenance and monitoring plan in place. So again, it's reverting back to ROTAS, reverting back to that 3D cleanliness, and staying on top of things. So it can all be done, but it's kind of what's the cost and how much certainty. So a few questions, you know, just to think about. Do you really know what cleanliness is in the context of your club or clubs? Have you got the right skills, the right people to do it? Have you got the right stuff? What's it going to cost to get it up to scratch now? What's it going to cost to stay on top of things? And might you benefit from a bit of additional help? Not everybody's going to do this, clearly. You know, we know in the past that certain operators have put more emphasis on cleanliness than others. Certain operators have put more emphasis on sales than others. You know, everybody's different. Everybody's got different priorities. But I do think, and I think that the data is supporting it through the likes of that LeisureNet survey, that, you know, those that do invest in this and do get it right are going to see an even greater disparity between themselves and the kind of also ran. So there is an opportunity here to do it. And I guess the outcomes from that are going to be, you know, pride in what you're doing and what you're delivering for the customers and members and also your staff, safeguarding the health and safety of your team, which you know is absolutely critical at the moment. But also that means protecting your reputation. You don't want to be the gym that has an outbreak of the virus, because, you know, people are probably then not going to come back or going to be less likely to come back. And it's going to help you to sell and retain memberships and help your bottom line. In terms of what we can do, just at a very headline level, we're doing 4 things to help. So we're doing loads and loads of free educational content like this. So the website, the YouTube, LinkedIn, if you're connected with me on LinkedIn, you know, every day there's stuff going out. And then we've got 3 ways we can help more formally. Firstly, which is a low-cost thing, is actually putting together a plan for you, a bespoke plan to help you in your particular centre to achieve the right results. And then we've got 2 ways of actually physically helping you to get up to the right standard. So there's us going in and doing it with our team, or there's kind of a hybrid model where we'll send some of our team in, but we'll also get some of your staff who are probably keen to earn some money right now, and who we can train, supervise, equip, and work alongside to ensure that we get to the right standard. And that's obviously a slightly cheaper way of doing it. So that's the end of part 1, other than some questions in a second. Part 2 will be coming up if you want to join me for that. But we'll open the floor for questions in a second, and then anybody that's perhaps we'll have a couple of minutes break if anybody wants to get a cup of tea or nip to the loo. And then obviously anybody that's seen enough can head off, and anybody that wants to stay is welcome to do so. So any questions, if you unmute yourself and shout out, and we will crack on with some questions. I can start. I did get an email through from Lorraine. I'm not sure if Lorraine's joining us, but she sent me an email. And it said, in the framework for gym opening, it mentions that hand wipes can be used. Do they have to be a particular one? And then she mentions we were using a particular version of sanitizing wipes. So I think what you should be looking for, if you can, is a virucidal product, so a disinfectant wipe rather than a sanitizing wipe. But I think the important thing to know is that you are going to need to do that kind of double process. So think about if you're traveling on an aeroplane or a train and you've got the tray table in front of you. If it's a bit grubby, your instinctive reaction is to pull out a wipe if you've got one and wipe it down. But even if you've got quite a strong alcohol wipe, all of the alcohol, all of the active ingredient is going to be used up cleaning the surface that first time you wipe it. And so you actually need to do a second process to properly disinfect or sanitize. So again, it's thinking about that double process. Once you have disinfected a surface and you're then trying to maintain it, that's when sanitizing can come into it. But I mean, in terms of specific brands, there'll be ridiculous numbers out there. The world's being flooded with hand gels and sanitizer wipes and disinfectant wipes and stuff. So it's just double checking what you've got and making sure you use it properly, basically. Did anybody have any other questions for now?
Further question, Christian.
Yes, hi, Jonathan.
Hi, thank you, really insightful presentation. I think it's quite easy to see slip safety as a technical issue. I think from my perspective, I would see it as part of the broader risk management and really a leadership and a cultural issue. How much do you see that the better performers from a cleanliness point of view actually are the ones where leaders and senior managers are actually getting involved and really see the value in it? Is that something that you see in top performers?
Absolutely, yeah. Not just in leisure, but across the piece in other sectors as well. I think that is one of the five pillars, I suppose, of the ROTAS model. It's about organisation, and that really is about management. And so, if you are invested in getting this right at the top level of an organisation, there's much more chance that that's going to filter down to towards the bottom. And I don't say that lightly, but to the staff that are actually doing the work. So if you go to a 5-star hotel, for example, and you walk around with the general manager, they will be absolutely on top of any bit of paper on the floor. They'll be picking it up and putting it in their pocket and moving on. They're always scanning the room. They're always looking for this stuff because they know in that world that cleanliness and hygiene are really important to their customers. And that's the kind of attitude that we all need now to be showing in the new world where that level is going to be expected from all of us. Whether we're a hotel, leisure club, whether we're a local authority, leisure centre, or anything in between.
Yeah.
Anybody else want to jump in for now? If not, then perhaps we can have a 2-minute break and then we'll crack on with part 2. There's going to be more opportunities to ask questions anyway as well.
Sorry, Chris, could I just nip in there quickly?
Yeah. Hi, Alan.
Chris, there's lots of bits and pieces that keep flying backwards and forwards across the internet about different methods to keep your areas disinfected. Obviously, like you said today, cleanliness is extremely important. First, you need to get a base to start from. Electrostatic sanitization and misting.
Yep.
You've obviously come across that?
Yep.
What's your thoughts on that? And is there any guidance out there in terms of its effectiveness?
Sure, thanks. So thanks, Alan. So we use those methods ourselves when we're being asked to go in and do a clean and disinfection of a building. So they clearly have merit. If you speak to infection control specialists, that work for the NHS or people like that, they would talk about the fact that those methods are going to reach the areas that physical cleaning alone won't reach. But conversely, if you look at the Public Health England guidance for how to deal with a known outbreak of COVID-19, it just talks about physical cleaning. I think that's because they want people to be accessible to people. What I would say is there's a difference between sanitizing and disinfection, as I've mentioned. There's also a difference between fogging and electrostatic. So this is all a bit technical, but fogging is where basically a liquid is being atomized and expelled in a directional way towards a surface. So if it's coming towards this surface and you're spraying it like this, then this bit of this surface here is going to get covered. What it probably won't do is get this side. If you're using electrostatic spraying, what that does is it kind of charges the liquid and it gives it either a positive or a negative charge. And what that means is that firstly, as it mists around, it doesn't overlap on itself. So in other words, you're only going to get one particle of coverage onto the surface, but also it does wrap around surfaces and gets into nooks and crannies that maybe fogging alone won't get to, and certainly physical cleaning, might not get to, or when you're just doing a physical clean might be missed. Because if you're doing a physical clean only, then of course you're very much reliant on the person doing it, that they're being thorough and they're getting to every single area. So
what we're possibly, sorry Chris, what we're possibly looking at within some of the local authority leisure facilities that we operate is having block sessions of different classes and that sort of thing, and then closing the area off for a certain time period in between for a half-hour, 45 minute session. So if we know that that equipment is clean beforehand at the beginning of the day, and we break off for a half-an-hour session, and we have one of these handheld electrostatic sanitization devices, we can go in there and we can hit everything in that room with that ES system and virtually be assured that that is disinfected. We wouldn't have time to wipe every piece of kit down.
No, exactly. I think that's one of the challenges. That to me seems, a sensible and a pragmatic way of doing it. You might argue that's a bit overkill because actually, realistically, I think members have got to take a bit of responsibility here as well. So I think a key part of the strategy coming out of this is going to be explaining to members what you've done, but also what your expectations are for them. So and providing them with sprays or wipes or whatever in different places and expecting them to clean the surfaces after they've used them and then sanitize them, for example. And actually that probably should be good enough to stay on top of things. You don't need to be, disinfecting every surface every day. I would suggest, get it clean, get it disinfected, and then you've got a benchmark from which you can start. And then it's about sanitizing, and it's figuring out, which is the most effective way. But also, there is an element here of consumer confidence. So I think your members would probably feel, if you were doing what you've described, that you're going above and beyond, and they would look at that very positively. So there is this side of things as well.
We've considered the use of possible videos to show what we're actually doing within our facilities and putting that out onto social media and websites to say, right, we're actually doing this for you guys before you come back into the facilities.
I think that's a good idea.
Yeah, they know what they're coming back into.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good idea. You've got to use this. You've got to think about this as an opportunity, as much as anything. It's an opportunity to do a reset. It's an opportunity to present a new experience, in all sorts of different ways to the customers. And therefore, you should be, if you're doing good stuff, you should be shouting about it. A, because why wouldn't you? And B, because that will give the members more confidence. Because there will be, I was chatting to Paul Bedford, the retention guru himself, and he was saying he's talking about three types of customers. You're going to have the people that are very nervous and probably aren't going to come back for some time, maybe not until there's a vaccine. You're going to have the vast majority of people in the middle who are probably going to be willing to come back, but they're going to be, mindful of what's going on. And then you're going to have the kind of more, I don't know what terminology he uses, but the more reckless people, let's say, who are going to come in and they're not going to take any notice of the rules and they're not going to help you sanitize and blah, blah, blah. So you've got to think about managing those three types of customers. And I think communication is going to be really, really important in this. So what are your expectations? What have we done for you as the operator? What can you do as the member to keep yourself safe, your fellow members safe, but also our staff safe as well. The other thing to say, of course, is that we're expecting that the vast majority of people coming into the facilities aren't going to have the virus, or it's unlikely they're going to have the virus, because of course there might be some asymptomatic people, but we're expecting that most people are going to be fine when they're coming in, because they're not going to be entering into the building if they're not. So bear that in mind as well. And again, we don't need overkill here. We just need something that's sensible and pragmatic. But really, you need to be able to, stand with your hand on your heart in front of a member and say, we've done everything we can to do this properly. And obviously, you do need to consider that, hopefully this won't ever happen and whatever. But if something bad does happen and you have to stand up in court and say, hand on heart, that's what you need to be.
Yeah, as we all know, COVID-19 is Riddle reportable now.
Yeah.
So we need to show that we have excellent management practices in place.
Yeah, definitely.
Right, thank you very much indeed, Chris.
Pleasure, yeah.
Christian, just while Alan mentioned electrostatic, suggestion is that it can last for a period of time. The literature that I've read suggests that once it's been, a surface has been treated, it can last up to 30 days. Obviously, that is subject to the amount of cleaning that takes place on that surface. But what's your thoughts on this 30-day suggestion?
So any disinfectant that can be used in an electrostatic, or sanitizer that can be used in an electrostatic sprayer, will have a residual effect up to the point that it gets contaminated again. So if this was a door handle and we used an electrostatic sprayer to disinfect this door handle, that would be disinfected, and anything that would touch that, virus-wise, bacteria-wise, would be killed. But as soon as somebody touches it with their hand, that effect disappears. So that's pretty much any disinfectant. What there are, though, are products that will have a much longer lifespan than that. So some talk about 7 days, some talk about 9 days. And then going a stage beyond, which I'm actually going to talk about in a minute, is there are some products that will have up to a 30-day residual effect. So that's something that we're kind of bringing on board and offering to people. It's being used by London Underground on the tube trains, for example. And if you use that particular type of technology, that doesn't wipe off as soon as someone touches it. That is a proper, it's a bit like sealing a floor. If you install a ceramic tile, you can seal it with something that's invisible, and it stops the dirt from penetrating into the floor. And this is kind of like that. So it wraps around the surfaces, and it has a microscopic sort of pinprick effect to it almost. And as viruses and bacteria, pathogens come up against it, they get killed. And that does last for a much longer period of time, as I say, up to 30 days. If you put it down on a kitchen floor and you allow the kitchen floor to get really greasy, then it's going to not be effective, because the grease is going to be catching the dirt before it touches the protective layer that's going to kill it, kill the germs. So you do need to clean it, but you don't need to do any more intensive cleaning or any particularly specialist cleaning. It's just the touch point cleaning and sanitizing that you're going to be doing anyway. But this will just give you an extra layer of comfort that you're doing everything you can. Does that?
No, that's fine. It's kind of in line with the literature that I've been reading.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Thanks.
Anyone else, or we can crack on? Conscious of time as well. All right, we'll crack on to part 2. Thank you for staying with us. So here we're just going to give you a bit more detail as to how we might be able to help you, talk about residual protection against viruses, which we've already touched on, so that's good, and then talk about what we do, our model in terms of maintenance as well, which we call CHAMP. And then, if anybody wants to take it forward further, happy to have a chat. So getting up to standard now, as I say, there's 4 different ways we can help totally free educational content like this, and then a few different paid for things that we can do. Content wise, LinkedIn is a good source, YouTube channel, so we've got some interviews with the likes of Paul Bedford and David Monkhouse. Neil Adebowale in the middle there, he's an insurance broker that specialises in leisure, so that's an interesting discussion around risk management as well. We've got a particular part of our website dedicated as well to this kind of leisure coronavirus relaunch, so suggest you take a look at that as well. The entry level stuff we can help you with is basically a desktop process to go through all of that stuff we talked about in part 1, but actually give our expertise to you and our knowledge to help you kind of get the best possible chance of achieving the right result. So effectively, it's as simple as this. If you send us your floor plans or the sizes split out by areas, what kit you've got or what kit you can get through your approved suppliers, what chemicals you've got or you can get, and a few other bits and bobs, some photos, for example. We'll send you a detailed methodology using that ROTAS model for each area. So how many days or hours you need, which product to use of the list you've given us, which equipment to use, which scrubber, which pad, which brush, whatever it might be, step by step how to do it. And that's in a totally agnostic way, because we're a service company, so we make money by physically going and doing work. We don't sell or make or get any commissions from any products, any chemicals, any pads, any brushes, any scrubbers or anything like that. So that's totally agnostic. So for that, basically that's 500 quid for us to do that for up to a handful of sites. If you've got more sites, we need to have a think about that, because it's going to take us a lot longer. So that's something that we can do, and that's just a way of giving you a bit more confidence that the method you're going to try is more likely to work. Obviously, we could come in and do the whole thing for you. Anybody that's managing local authority leisure centres, what we're seeing among our clients at the moment is that certain councils are being very supportive and are wanting to get this done, and are actually saying we'll pay for somebody specialist to come in and do this, whereas others are being less helpful. So if you do have any friendly, good relationships with councils, that's a discussion that's worth having. And the idea of this is basically that you say, sort this out for us. You don't have to worry about it. You know that it's getting done properly, and we clean, we disinfect, and we potentially protect it as well, and it's all done without you having to worry. In between that, there's a hybrid model which is done with you, which is proving quite popular. So the premise of this is basically that it's expensive for us to send all of our team in, because obviously we need to make a margin from our people, because that's how we make our money, by having people doing work. But there's a way of us sending some people in to do some of the work, and some other people in to supervise, train, equip and manage and work alongside some of your staff to do the kind of easier bits of a club. So that's bringing our experience and skills, all the methodologies. We could provide the kit, the chemicals and all this other stuff. So in other words, we know it's going to work and we take responsibility for delivering it. But we bring in some of your staff. So whether they're furloughed or they're not furloughed because they can't be, like PTs, we bring them in. That gives them a bit of income. It shows them that you're kind of looking out for them, and it upskills them as well. So they then know and can do this really well. So going forward, for 90% of the club, they'll be able to do it themselves, because we'll have basically trained them to do it and then worked alongside them. And that clearly that keeps the cost down, because we're not making any margins or any money off of your staff. So that's proving fairly popular. We talked a bit about this. Something else that could be added in is, and this is kind of an illustration microscopically of how it works that Mike was asking about. It's kind of like little pins, and as the pathogens hit them, they get broken up. And as I say, there are products that are proven to last for up to 30 days. So what we're doing with offices and leisure clubs and various other places is going in every 28 days and just doing reapplication of that product. And then bring it all together and thinking about actually staying on top of things as well. We've, again, another acronym, because I'm a fan of acronyms, we've come up with this offering called CHAMP. So this is basically cleanliness, hygiene, anti-slip, maintenance plan. So this is working with you in the long run to actually try and help keep the standards high as we go. So essentially it's right, we're currently here, let's get you up to where we need to be. We then work with you on your daily cleaning, but again, in an agnostic way, because we don't have products to sell you, we don't have equipment to sell you, we've got nothing to sell you at all, in fact, when it comes to daily cleaning. But we can help you to do it better because we know about this stuff. And then every so often we come in and we do another deep clean. And this really is designed for the barefoot and the wet areas of clubs, not the whole area, because actually those are the bits that are hard to keep clean. Those are the bits where the members most notice the aesthetic cleanliness. And so that model, you know, we know works quite well. So it's getting it up now, giving you that advice and helping you and training you and supporting you on a daily basis. And then we think every 6 months is probably appropriate for a leisure club to come back in and deep clean, disinfect and anti-slip or slip test, at least for the wet areas, the barefoot areas. Some of the stuff we would do there, and that would include all of the testing and the certification and things like that. So again, going back to an average sized wet health club, one thing I didn't touch on in part one is, well, if it's going to take us 6 days, what does that actually mean? What's that going to cost us? Well, if you do the maths, I think, again, for an average wet size health club, if you've got 6 people for 6 days, and you've got some chemical and equipment and PPE and various other things, I think that's going to cost you to do it yourself about £1,000 a day, so about £6,000 for an average wet-sized health club. Again, if you've got something like a London Aquatic Centre, you know, it's a lot more because it's a lot more work. If you've got a small gym, you know, it might be 2 days, it might be £2,000, or it might be, you know, even a bit less potentially, depending on, you know, what you've got in there and how big and so on and so forth. But this is just to give you an indication of how this works. If we're coming in and doing it with you, so we're using that hybrid model, I reckon it's going to cost you about 25% more. But obviously that comes with the certainty that it's going to be done. And it also comes with the electrostatic disinfection and the certification and all these other things. So a bit of a premium to do it that way. If you said, can you come and do the whole thing? That's again an additional cost. About 50% more than if you were going to try and do it yourself. But if people sign up to work with us in the long run, then what we're saying is we'll actually come in and do that initial work for the same cost as if you're going to do it yourself. So in other words, you know, you're going to have to spend this money anyway, one way or another. Perhaps you could spend it sensibly in a way that you know you're going to get the results, rather than spending it in a way where, you know, you might well get the result, but you might not. And in terms of the ongoing maintenance, again, in an average wet size club, to come in and twice a year and do a thorough clean, disinfection, anti-slip of all of the wet and barefoot areas is something like 10k a year. If you put that in the perspective versus the cost of hiring those 2 extra cleaners, it's significantly less, because your 2 extra cleaners is 40 grand a year. So we reckon most places, you know, if we were coming in and doing that work, if they then added in another 3 hours a day of cleaning themselves, they would keep that standard up to a good level. But obviously the cost of that would be much, much less. And this is all about actually getting that guarantee. So, you know, us coming and doing it, you know, we're going to make sure it's done properly. So you've got the standards, you've got the hygiene, you've got the slip safety, and we can do that potentially for the same cost. It's about exceeding the members' new expectations and not just meeting them, which maybe you can do yourself, but actually let's exceed them. Let's give them an as new facility. By working with us in the longer run, we believe, or we know from experience, in fact, that you don't then need to dramatically increase your day-to-day costs and the complexity around that as well. And fundamentally, as I said, it's about ensuring, that this is going to work for you in the long run. So there's work to be done, as we saw from the photos, but there is, as we've said, a really good opportunity to deliver a great experience, a world-leading experience, to protect your members and staff, be certain to operate safely, so actually know and prove and be able to stand there with your hand on heart that you're doing it properly, and fundamentally to ensure the success of your company. We're all worried about what's going to happen to memberships, but I can tell you for a fact that if you don't get this bit right, you're going to really struggle. All the data, all of the membership surveys, everything we're hearing and seeing from and that's not us saying it, that's everyone in the industry is saying that this is going to be really, really important. So that's how we could help you, and an idea of what it might look like commercially. If you want to discuss that further, you can always call me or email me. Feel free to hang on here and ask any further questions as a result of part number 2. And I'll just say as well, we are going to have a limited capacity. We couldn't clean all 7,000 leisure centres even if everybody wanted us to, because even if they were going to pay us a lot more than the numbers we've given you, because actually we're only going to take on stuff that we know we can deliver properly and up to the right standard. So, particularly the later people leave it, obviously the less capacity that there's going to be. So with that, that's me finished talking, but happy to take any further questions if you have any specifics, or feel free to give me a shout separately if you'd like to chat things through further as well.